How are you? Good. I just wanted to get up here. Most of you know Gary, but I just want to give him both an introduction and you all a reminder of what we talked about last week for worship. The same holy messiness happens to our holy listening. So whatever you've got in the tank, bring it. Remember, we're not consumers, we are participators together. Gary's poured his heart out for this moment, and we pour our hearts out in response. Amen? Okay, so he's out. Sorry. I'm leaving. Yeah, okay, all right. Gary and Jennifer are such a blessing to this community. They aren't actually young adults. They are adults. That's all. I didn't call you old, okay? But you've still got it. You've still got it, okay? But we need in this community is spiritual fathers and mothers. We need that in the church at large, and they are that in this place. So I'm just so honored that they're here. Yes, we can clap for that. They are a blessing to me personally. When I first met Gary and Jennifer, the first things out of their mouth were just directness and questions and pressing and just like, where are you going to go with this? What are we going to do about this? And I was like, okay, they care. I was like, let's go. So I'm just very grateful for you, honor you tonight, and thank you for doing this and giving me a week off. That's a huge blessing to me, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, holy listening, holy messiness tonight as we listen to our brother. Amen? Let's go.
Yep. And I promise I'll be done in 2 hours. Oh, okay. I guess I didn't. Could have sworn it was unmuted. I was determined to get that right too, because you see always people come up here and the first time it doesn't quite work. So I was like, I'm gonna do this right. So much for that. All right. Welcome everybody. I'm glad you could be here tonight. Thank you for my tea, Maddie. Yeah, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. Okay, before I start, we did a little thing where we sent out an email, we sent out some texts, we sent out some Instagrams, and we said basically if you register ahead of time, you might win some movie tickets. Right, so that's what I'm gonna do first. Do we have Jason Quillen here? It says $500 there. This isn't $500. But it's $30, so that's enough for 2 tickets there. Enjoy. Mm-hmm. All right. And I told you, Dylan, that I was going to put a timer on, except my phone is about to die, so that's not going to work. I might need to have you tell me when I'm at 40 minutes, so I know I'm a third of the way done. I'm going to put this on mute because I'm sure I'll get a solicitor or something will probably call me during this time. So, as he said, my name's Gary Lundblad. This is a really kind of a special night for me. The reason for that is that this teaching I want to do tonight is something that I've wanted to do for over 25 years. It's 25 years in the making. Better be really good then, huh? If it's not good, you're going to be like, well, that took him 25 years? Don't know why I never taught it before. Oh, you're giving me a timer? Oh, you rock. Yeah, awesome. Okay. And the cool thing is that only says 14 seconds now, and I've been talking for a couple minutes, so I get a little bit extra time. So anyway, I've been mulling this thing over, building this teaching for like 25 years. And really, it started 35 years ago when I got saved, became a Christian at the age of 18, and really was a doubter, a skeptic. And so I came into the church. They called me the kid with 1,001 questions, because every time they gave me an answer, I had 3 more questions for them. And so I really just dug into the evidence for Christianity, evidence for God. I just ate it up. Kind of probably became a little bit obsessive over it. And that's just been over the last 35 years, probably one of my hobbies. I'm not like a super smart person, but I've studied the topic like a lot. So I don't claim to come into this thinking that, hey, I'm the man, I'm a really smart guy. I'm not even the smartest guy in this room. I'm probably not even the smartest guy on the stage right now. But I've studied this a lot. So I'm going to share with you kind of what I have tonight. To be perfectly transparent, I'm a little bit anxious tonight, not because it bothers me to talk in front of people. It's actually what I do for a living. But because this topic, I'm really afraid of losing track of time, and I could be up here for an hour and a half really easily. So I've been over the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, consistently trying to cut this. Okay, Russell said I could have 50 minutes. Okay, so I would run through, I'd record it, and I'd go, it's an hour and 7 minutes. I'd go through it again, I'd cut, and you know when you're cutting, you're like, ooh, but I should add this here. And I'd get done, and it's an hour and 5 minutes. I mean, I just went through this thing. I cannot tell you how many times. So I'm more nervous about the fact that I don't have it as prepared as I wanted, because I didn't even finish this till this morning. I was still working on this morning. I knew I was going to teach this like a couple months ago. But the other thing is that I thought I would be able to run my slides from up here. Don't ever assume anything. And so based on that, I put together 113 slides. Yeah! And then found out that, no, I can't do it. Dylan's going to have to run those back there. I'm like, how in the world is he going to know when to switch my slides? Am I going to have to memorize this thing verbatim so he can have cues? So that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to memorize this. Yeah. And that just was in the last week and a half, and it just was not coming together. So at work, what I do is I do a lot of training at work, but it's always virtual. Like I'm training people over the internet. It could be large crowds of people, but they don't know if I'm looking at my notes. You guys are going to know I'm looking at my notes. But I'm just kind of swallowing my pride tonight. I'm going to look at my notes. I'm going to make sure he has his cues. And I'm just going to do this thing, what I think the Lord has given me to say. So if you notice me looking at this a lot, it's because I'm really trying to stay on track. It'd be too easy for me to get off track, and I don't want to let that happen. Notes are very good. I agree. Thank you. So I just pray tonight things flow. They're not confusing. When I was going in and chopping things out, hopefully I didn't chop out so much that you're like, what is he talking about? Hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think this topic is really important because most Christians really don't have a good, firm grasp on why they believe what they do. A lot of times they just were raised in the church and they go off to college. And unfortunately, you've got professors out there whose mission in life is to destroy Christians' faith. There's a lot of them out there. They take that on as a mission. They are hell-bent, literally, on destroying faith. And just a lot of Christians just they lose their faith in high school. Unfortunately, those professors are really successful at that. And in the world today, there's really an idea out there that if you believe in God, if you're a Christian, it's outdated, you're a fool, it's irrelevant. And there's just narrative, and to where you get the idea that if you think you have good reasons to believe in God or whatever, you just assume I must be an idiot. There probably aren't good reasons to believe this. I'm just going along until something happens, maybe a major trial in your life, and now you walk away from the Lord because you weren't really solid. You didn't know why you believed what you did. So this subject is so massive, I literally could sit up here for 3 hours and probably not stop. My voice would probably go out before I'd be done coming up with things that I want to say. So I'm really only going to be able to scratch the surface tonight. But my goal is not to completely give you guys all the evidence that there is to give. I want to open your eyes to the truth that there is overwhelming evidence supporting the existence of God. The idea that it's outdated, that you're a fool if you believe this, it's irrelevant, is a flat-out lie. So my goal is just to open your eyes and motivate you so that you will want to go further down this path, because there's a lot more to discover. You're not going to get it all tonight. But I'm hoping I'll show you enough that you realize it's worth going down that road. All right, so all of that, which was not really in my cues I gave you, I'm ready to jump to slide 2 right now. So only 112 more to go. All right. So I think people run into all kinds of problems when they look at the subject of God and Christianity because of how they approach it. So tonight I want to do some thinking about our thinking and look at things in a way that maybe you've never looked at them before. To start off, I want you to imagine a large black circle, and that circle represents all possible knowledge. That's everything that could be known about everything in existence. And now on top of that blue circle, I want you to put a blue circle, and that represents how much you personally know. Okay, and then later on, we're going to compare blue circles. So make sure that that blue circle is, it is a circle. It's a circle. I don't know, get your eyes checked. So the point being that there's a lot more that we don't know than what we do know. Okay, and beyond that, we should also realize that there's things that we're flat out wrong about. Even as we sit here, even as I sit here right now, there's things that I think and believe that are not true. The problem is, that's my daughter there. She's almost 14, going on 27. But the odds, if you think about it, the odds against me being right about everything I believe would be astronomical. Okay, it's not even possible. So the problem, obviously, is I don't know which things those are. If I did, I would change them. So I realize I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but I think it's important to bring this kind of information to the forefront of your mind before you look at a topic like this, so that you come into it with a certain amount of humility, an open mind, to recognize, wow, I could be wrong about this, whatever it is that I think. So based on that understanding that there's a lot we don't know, we're definitely wrong about some things and we don't know what those are, let's try to come tonight with an open mind and really a humility that says, hey, let's find out. Maybe I'm wrong about some things. So I learned some hard lessons over the last 20 years, particularly when I was laid off from my job in 2004. Started a business, my own business, in 2005. We lost our dream house in 2006 and lost our business in 2008. And then there's been other things since then. But that was kind of a run of losses kind of in my life particularly. Besides learning a lot of tough lessons about myself through all of that, I also learned something that I want to share with you tonight. And the idea is this. With any really big decision, before looking at how likely is this thing could turn out well, you need to consider what are the risks and the rewards that are associated with this decision. And this step in the process is important because maybe you realize that the upside is decent, all right, but the downside is horrible. Okay, and the more you think about it, the more you sit with it, the more you realize that the horrible is really horrible. Okay, it's not just a little horrible, it's really bad. Leading you to understand that an idea that maybe has a 50-50 chance of success is a bad idea. You should be looking for a very small chance of failure. So let me give you an analogy that I think will help. Let's pretend that we're gambling on a football game. And I'm not endorsing gambling, okay? This is just an analogy. Don't throw anything at me. The Seattle Seahawks are playing the Minnesota Vikings, all right? If you bet on the Vikings and you win, I'm going to give you $100, all right? Sounds pretty good. But if they lose, you're going to pay me $1 million. But if you bet on the Seahawks and they lose, you only owe me $100. And if they win, I will give you $1 million. I got her attention now. Which team are you going to bet on? Okay, I hope you'd say the Seahawks every time. If not, come talk to me afterwards, all right? The point, this is what I mean by risks and rewards, because with the Seahawks, you have a relatively small downside and an extremely high upside. Whereas with the Vikings, you have a relatively small upside and a really horrible downside. So let's apply this to the Christian faith. Okay, I said I wasn't endorsing gambling, but the reality is all of us are gambling every single day with our lives, whether we realize it or not. If our lives are like a roulette wheel, our chips are all sitting on either black or red as it pertains to Christianity. Blaise Pascal was a 17th century French mathematician, physicist, inventor, and philosopher, basically a really smart guy. He shared an idea in his writings that is referred to as Pascal's wager. Essentially, when examining the Christian faith, there's two options. Okay, either it's right or it's wrong. I'm going to bunny trail for just a minute. I think a lot of non-Christians kind of tend to assume that Christians are just people who like religious things. Some people like movies, some people like sports, and some people like religion and churchy things, right? But it's a dangerous misconception because it allows people to easily dismiss Christianity because they aren't just that type of person. They're not. It's good for them. They're religious. They like that. I'm not. But I'm not a Christian because I like religion and churchy things. I'm a Christian because I happen to believe that it's true. It has nothing to do with what I like or don't like. I actually was quite resistant to it initially because I didn't like religion or church. And I thought religious people were kind of weird. Okay, it was not my thing. Okay, I still think religious people are kind of weird. I just happen to be one of them now. So when it comes to examining Christianity, it's either right or it's wrong, and we have two options. We can either embrace it or not. Okay, and there's really no middle ground. It's one way or the other. So I want to look at the possible risks associated with each one so we can move forward with some context that I think will help us so make sure that we're weighing the arguments and the evidence in a fair and reasonable way. So what if Christianity is wrong and you embrace it? Okay, what will it cost you? What does the risk side of the equation look like? Okay, well, actually, this is debatable. Okay, because some people would say you would lose quite a lot because you invested so much of yourself in something that wasn't true. It was essentially a lie. But other people would say you actually still gained because your life was more meaningful, more fulfilling, more rich, as opposed to just believing that everything and everyone is a cosmic accident, which I happen to think is really depressing. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to acknowledge that maybe it did cost you quite a bit, all right? So what if the Christian faith is wrong and you don't embrace it? What will you gain? What's the reward for having a correct choice here? Well, let's again say, for the sake of argument, that you did gain quite a bit. All right, you were able to spend your time and resources on things that directly benefited you. You weren't burdened and held down by some kind of moral pressure, any objective standard of right and wrong. You were free of all of those things. And so let's say you did benefit quite a bit. So let's look at the flip side. What if the Christian faith turns out to be true and you embrace it? Okay, what would you gain? Well, let's just say it goes beyond our ability to imagine, all right? It's greater than any frame of reference that we have for comparison. The Bible actually tells us a lot about heaven. That's a fascinating study, if you have the time. The book Heaven by Randy Alcorn, one of my favorite books. But for now, just imagine the most amazing thing you can come up with, all right? The most exciting adventure with the people that you love hanging out with, doing the funnest things you've ever done. Maybe you have superpowers. I don't know. I tend to like to think about being able to fly, like Superman. I think that would be really fun. But stretch your imagination as far as it will go. All right, you can be secure in the fact that no matter what you come up with, it's not going to be as good as the real thing. So you're not going to be disappointed for sure. If Christianity is true and you wholeheartedly embrace it, the rewards would vastly exceed anything that I have ever desired. Because if Christianity is true, God even created sex. Yeah, he just said sex in church. Think about that, though. It doesn't really line up with the stuffy picture we have of God a lot of times, though, does it? It was his idea. And if the idea of paradise seems too fantastical for you, you probably have seen too many movies. All right, I actually think that there's a programming that happens in our mind where we've just kind of programmed ourselves. When we see something really fantastical, our brain puts it in the fantasy category of our mind. I think that's something that the enemy does on purpose. But think about things that are just truly amazing in our world right now, that if you really think about them, they're almost too fantastical to believe. Okay, the beauty and innocence of a little child. Okay, kids are so adorable. All right, you take my word for it. My wife and I kind of have a joke about this, that God actually made kids really cute because he knew we wouldn't take care of them if they weren't. And the ones that really have the parents who are irresponsible, he has to give really cute kids. So if your kids are really cute, it's not a compliment. It's not. Are we seeing? We're still not seeing. Are the slides working? You can see it? Okay, well, there's really cute kids up there. Think about all the varieties of plants that there are in the world. Oh. Yeah, aren't those cute kids? Cute kids. Awesome, thank you. But amazing varieties of plants, amazing varieties of animals. So you're going to notice, though, some of these pictures are not super sharp. They looked great on my 27-inch monitor, but they're not going to look so great up there. But different kinds of animals. Do they? Well, it looks a little dark to me. I don't know what the problem is. But lots of different kinds of animals, crazy animals, breathtaking sunsets. Anybody here like sunsets? Just gorgeous oranges and reds, and it's just amazing. And if you look at those sometimes and just go, that's too amazing to be real. Think about pristine white snow. You know, after the snow has fallen, you look out there, everything looks so clean and beautiful. Kind of like a winter wonderland. Rainbows. What in the world? This big, beautiful color across the sky, that's not too amazing. Double rainbows, incredible storms. Anybody else like storms? I love lightning and thunderstorms. Just really, again, you look at these things and go, that's real? Our family really likes, blue sky with white fluffy clouds. Any of you guys like to look up there and sometimes see different shapes and things? I challenge you sometime, the next time it's really sunny out and it's blue sky and white fluffy clouds, let yourself kind of step back for a minute in your mind, and instead of seeing that as the sky, envision that it's a beautiful canopy that the Lord has just kind of put there. And we just drive under that all the time, completely indifferent to it. We've gotten used to it. If Christianity is true, all these things came from the mind of God. What do you think a being like this has planned for the next world? Because the Bible says that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. We're not going to be in heaven forever. I don't know if you guys realize that. This was eye-opening for me at one point. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. We're going to live forever on the new earth. It's a physical place. What do you think God has in store for that? I want you to keep this in mind as we look at some of the compelling reasons why I think that it makes sense to believe that this being exists. According to the Bible, our life in this world is kind of a test. Okay, it's preliminary to God's real plan that starts once our life in this world ends. All right, if you think about it, history of mankind, thousands and thousands of years. After what happens here, trillions of years, forever. All right, my story isn't over when I close my eyes in this world for the last time. That's really when it starts. It'll blow your mind if you spend some time thinking about it. The philosopher and author C.S. Lewis said, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." Okay, let's bring this evaluation to a close by looking at the final option. What if the Christian faith winds up being true and you don't embrace it? Okay, what will it cost you? All right, this part is kind of heavy, so I'm going to keep it brief. Let's just say that you've never imagined anything that would be as terrible as this in your most terrifying nightmares. You don't have any frame of reference, kind of like heaven. No matter what terrible experience, horror flick you can come up with, it really doesn't compare to this, and this will never end. So take a minute and sit with this, because if you're not currently a Christian, this is one possible outcome. We haven't got to really any of the evidence yet, but it's a possible outcome. And here's the billion-dollar question. Are you ready? Trillion-dollar question. How much have you really studied the topic objectively up until now? Have you even taken it seriously? Because if you're not a Christian, you're currently betting everything that you're right about this. Have you done your homework sufficiently to be confident about that, seeking out the best arguments in favor of Christianity, or have you only just really listened to those who are against it? I want to challenge you tonight to have an open and willing mind as you look at the possibility that Christianity could be true. And don't stop with what I share tonight, because I don't have time, like I said, to get into all of this. There's many who've made a far more compelling, more comprehensive case than you're going to hear from me tonight. Like I said, my goal is to awaken you to search for God with all your heart. And I have no doubt that if you do, you will find him, and way more than sufficient evidence to support your belief. And here's something to think about. I've heard people ask the question, if God is real, why doesn't he make himself more obvious? I've thought a lot about that question over the years. I think it's a really good question. I don't know if I have the answer, but I have a thought. Is it possible that God provided clues and more than enough evidence for those who are willing to follow those clues and find him, but not enough to compel those who don't? Could he possibly have a reason for wanting to separate those people who are more than willing to bow their knee to their Creator from those who really don't want him? All right, if you're someone who's had this question and wondering why God doesn't just make himself more obvious, have you possibly been telling him to leave you alone by your actions and your choices? If I get choked up tonight, it's just because I'm getting old and I get choked up over things a lot easier. But ask yourself this, is he giving you what you want? It's just something to think about. So we spent quite a bit of time thinking about our thinking, preparing ourselves to consider the existence of God and Christianity in a fair and reasonable way. So let's dive now into some of the reasons why I think that belief in God and Christianity is the most sensible option. Let me start by asking you a question. This is a deep question. Are you ready? Yes. Have you ever wondered why there is something rather than nothing at all? Think about it sometime. Go for a walk and just ask yourself, why is there anything? All right, suppose you were walking in the woods with your friend and you came across a round ball. It's about the size of a bowling ball. It had some strange markings on it. You didn't really know what that was all about. And so you asked your friend, you commented, I wonder what this is, where it came from. And he said to you, oh, it's always been there. No reason. Okay. Would you accept that? Or would you think maybe your friend found some mushrooms as you were walking through the woods? Okay. Or maybe he was trying to hide something from you. Maybe he was hiding the mushrooms. You would know instinctively that it had to come from somewhere. Roy, what if the bowling ball was the size of the Grand Canyon? Does that change the need for it to have a cause? What if it was the size of the earth? Does it still need a cause? What if it's the size of the entire universe? All right, no one has to tell us that things need causes. If a hippo all of a sudden just wandered in here and I told you it's been here forever, it's uncaused, it just is. All right, you'd know I was on crack, or I was an idiot, or probably both. Okay, the universe is no different. Well, what if somebody said, though, the universe has always been here, it's self-existent, just kind of the same way people say God is self-existent? All right, well, that's a good question. Let's unpack that. But first, let me say, though, that the overwhelming consensus today, even among atheists, is that the universe had a beginning at the Big Bang. But no one knows what caused the Big Bang. Well, Christians think they do know, but mainstream science does not claim to know. And mathematicians recognize that the idea of an actual infinite collection of things is impossible and leads to some really strange contradictions. If you look at it, you'll see what that's all about. You can have a conceptual infinite, like 1, 2, 3. The amount of numbers in the set of whole numbers is a conceptual infinite. This part I realize is a little bit hard to grasp. So if you struggle with this, don't feel bad. I struggled with this for quite a while before it finally kind of had an aha. So since past events are not just a concept, like a number, they're a real thing, the collection of past events has to be finite. So, and think about it this way. If I start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, how long is it going to take until I get to infinity? Right, never. I would never get there. Well, if you can't count to infinity, you can't count down from infinity either. If I was let's suppose I was counting from infinity past, and right now I'm down to -3, -2, -1, 0. I finished. Well, before I counted -3, I would have had to count -4. Before that, I would have had to count -5, going on into the past. The moment we're experiencing right now rests on the shoulders, so to speak, of all the moments that have gone before, and that collection of moments cannot be infinite. Think of it like dominoes. Okay, one domino can't fall till the domino before it falls. If there were an infinite number of dominoes before the domino that represents our current moment right now, essentially this current moment domino would never fall, because you would have to have an infinite number of dominoes have to fall first. And you cannot complete an infinite set. This moment right now would be a miracle if the past was infinite, okay, from a natural standpoint. And since there can't logically be an infinite collection of past moments, there had to be a first moment, right? Well, that means that there was a first cause that led to the very first effect. Okay, a first domino, an extremely long line of dominoes, but according to the natural law of cause and effect, you can't have an uncaused cause. Okay, that's not some obscure theory. This is a scientific law. Every effect has a cause. If you want to reject the existence of a supernatural creator, I don't see how you can avoid having to reject the natural law of cause and effect. On top of this, we have the second law of thermodynamics. I won't go into all of it, but it's the law of entropy, and it tells us, among other things, that the universe will eventually reach a point of maximum entropy, and all heat will be evenly distributed throughout the universe, everywhere. They call this the heat death of the universe. Well, if the universe is eternal, then why hasn't it already reached heat death? Okay, maximum entropy. Okay, some of these things, these are reasons why even atheists will acknowledge that the universe had a beginning. And if you work entropy backwards, the universe would have had a point of minimum entropy at the very beginning. And if you look at just the initial entropy conditions in the Big Bang, what's the likelihood of a universe that can support life coming into existence coincidentally? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Because Roger Penrose, a famous British mathematician, close friend of Stephen Hawking, if you've heard of him, wondered about this same question, and he calculated the probability of the initial entropy conditions of the Big Bang. Well, according to Penrose, the odds against such an occurrence were on the order of 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. 10 to the power of 123, if you're not up on math, means 10 with 123 zeros. That alone is more than the number of atoms in the universe. But this is not 1 followed by 123 zeros. It's 1 followed by 10 to the 123rd power zeros. It's inconceivable. That's the chances that the Big Bang would have had the correct initial entropy conditions. Dr. Arnold Penzias, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, co-discoverer of the background microwave radiation in the universe, which provided evidence for the Big Bang, he said the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. This guy was a Nobel Prize winner. Dr. George Greenstein, professor of astronomy at Amherst College, said, "As we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or rather capital A agency, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being?" It's a professor of astronomy. The appearance of the universe was designed to support life is overwhelming. Secular scientists have observed that for physical life to be possible anywhere in the universe, many properties must have specific values. Okay, this apparent fine-tuning in the universe is not disputed, and it's referred to as the anthropic principle. Did you get what I just said? Okay, no one disputes this. Secular scientists can't explain it, but they don't dispute it. For example, Stephen Hawking said he's estimated that if the rate of the universe's expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have recollapsed into a hot fireball due to gravitational attraction. Physicist P.C.W. Davies has calculated that the odds against the initial conditions being suitable for star formation, without which planets could not exist. You don't have planets, we're never going to have life. is 1 followed by at least 1,000 billion zeros. I hope you're starting to feel like my faith has some substance, all right? There are dozens and dozens of such constants and quantities present in the Big Bang, which must be exquisitely fine-tuned if the universe is ever going to permit life. Okay, meaning without this fine-tuning, we would not have a universe that could ever result in life anywhere. Okay, this is something that both Christians and non-Christian scientists agree on completely. As far as anyone has been able to determine, there's no plausible natural reason why these constants and quantities should have the values that they do. British astrophysicists I think are pretty smart, Sir Frederick Hoyle remarked, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics. We have before us a serious problem, all right, a conundrum. I love that word, I had to slip it in there somewhere. God is not the problem. Okay, I believe he's actually the solution to the problem that we already have. Because understand this, if you take God out of the equation, we have a major problem. Things don't add up. We have some serious contradictions that we have to explain. All right, because we've already seen that it's impossible to have an infinite past. Right? Because you can't complete an infinite set. It's impossible for the past to be infinite. At the same time, there's no natural explanation for an uncaused cause. And yet one of those has to be true. Either the past is infinite or we have a first cause. And there's no credible answers, by the way, being offered at this point. Believe me, you'd hear about them if there were. So if so many scientists see the problem, why don't more of them believe in God? All right, that is a terrific question, and I'm way behind. The reality is that many of them are afraid, quite frankly, to come forward because of the backlash they're going to get almost certainly from the scientific community. I've got a great documentary up here on this called Expelled, if you're interested. Really interesting. But beyond that, many of them just believe that eventually we'll discover a natural explanation for everything, what they refer to as a theory of everything, or a TOE. Okay, I guess that sounds... What? I mean, non-Christians have been criticizing Christians for blind faith for a long time, but tell me if that doesn't sound to you like the stubborn blind faith of an atheist. Like, we'll eventually discover a theory for everything? I mean, how does it get more blind faith than that? Let me revisit something I said at the beginning. Remember the question, if God is real, why doesn't he make himself more obvious? I suggested the idea that maybe God's provided clues and more than enough evidence for those who want to follow the clues and find them, but not enough to compel those who don't. Consider this quote by Thomas Nagel, professor of philosophy and law emeritus at New York University. He says, I want atheism to be true and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope I'm right about my belief. It's that I hope there's no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. I think this is a lot more prevalent than we realize. Another topic's definitely worth studying, but I don't have time to get into it tonight, is Darwinian evolution. There is so much deception on that topic. It's so tempting right now to want to spend another half hour talking about that. But I would recommend the following books: Icons of Evolution, Darwin's Black Box, The Edge of Evolution, or one of my absolute favorites, A Case for a Creator. Another fascinating study is DNA. It's been compared to computer code that is far more advanced than anything we're able to write. Another one of my favorite books is Signature in the Cell by Stephen J. Meyer, that looks into this topic in detail. It's pretty technical. It's not an easy read. But it's literally like God put his signature right there for mankind to discover. And a lot of people are discovering it. Arguably the most prominent atheist of the 20th century, Antony Flew, professor of philosophy, author, and debater, announced in 2004 that he had become convinced that there is no way these things, speaking of DNA, could have evolved by chance due to their stunning information content. He said, "It now seems to me that the findings of more than 50 years of DNA research have provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design. There's so many great quotes. I had to cut some great ones out of here. With everything I've shared so far, and as I said, there's a ton I didn't put in here. Ask my family, they can tell you. You may be wondering how prevalent atheism is among scientists. I mean, aren't most scientists atheists? Well, according to a 2009 Pew poll, less than half of the AAAS are atheists. The AAAS is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the world's largest general scientific society. So the idea that most scientists are atheists is a false narrative being peddled by a few elite that feel a need to control the message. And they hold a lot of power and a lot of influence in the scientific community, unfortunately. Again, that documentary I have called Expelled is a great one. And by the way, those scientists that were in the poll, only 17% of them identified themselves as atheists. I wonder how they came up with all the rest of them that they thought were atheists, if they didn't identify themselves that way. The last thing I want to talk about is related to the existence of God, is kind of related to God, but also kind of related to Christianity. So I think it's a good segue. Some people argue that Christianity can't be true because of all the evil and suffering in the world. And although I do think that argument is compelling, I think it fails for an obvious reason. And actually winds up proving the existence of God and the validity of Christianity instead. I know this is a very sensitive topic. A lot of people have gone through some horrific things, a lot of suffering in their life, a lot more than me. I don't want in any way to appear callous to that, but I would be doing a disservice if I didn't point out that if there is no God, then there is no such thing as good and evil, ultimately making suffering meaningless. Christianity actually makes sense of evil and suffering. If there's no God, morality is an illusion. All right, people may have evolved a sense of right and wrong, but if it was evolved, it's meaningless. There would literally be no difference between helping a little kid who's fallen down in the street and shooting him in the head. There'd literally be no difference. But we know deep down that some things are good and some things are evil, no matter what we say. Murder, rape, incest, slavery, racism, shooting a little kid in the head. All of these things are evil, and we know it. But if there's no God, there is nothing wrong with any of these things. Okay, we're animals, and animals kill one another violently every single day. And nobody's concerned about it. It doesn't matter how we live if we are only a cosmic accident. Okay, some kind of bacteria that's evolved like mold on this insignificant rock in the midst of a massive, indifferent universe. All right, we're of no more intrinsic value than a virus or a bacteria. Does anybody here think it's evil to kill a virus? Is that murder? Right, we're animated meat that will pass away relatively soon with no more ultimate purpose than survival, reproduction, and enjoyment. Live for today, all right? And if God doesn't exist, don't even begin to talk to me about our responsibility to take care of our environment or to be tolerant of other people's beliefs, to look out for other people with handicaps or people who are less fortunate than we are or accept alternate lifestyles. If there's no God, there is zero reason for me to be tolerant and accepting. I mean, you can certainly try to convince me that it's in my best interest to adhere to some kind of set of moral standards, but you can't lay any kind of guilt trip on me about it, right? It's just up to me. Believe me, I could go on and on and on, but I don't have time tonight. So suffice it to say that there is more than sufficient reason, if you have an open mind, to believe in God. And I hope you will go down that trail. It would honestly take a serious leap of faith for me to be an atheist. And I don't have that much faith. And if some kind of supernatural being might exist, let me ask you a question. Wouldn't that make the possibility of miracles more believable? Because the problem most people have with Jesus and the Bible is that they approach it with an assumption that miracles are not possible. They come at it with an anti-supernatural bias. Does that seem fair or even smart? Right? Because they didn't arrive at that conclusion scientifically. They arrived at that conclusion philosophically, and yet it's determining from the outset what they will consider and what they won't. Right? Isn't that what Christians have been accused of doing for a long time? Supposedly, we're criticized because we assume God before we ever look at the facts. Right? And I'm sure that's happened a lot of the time, but many, if not most atheists, as you can see, assume atheism before even looking at the facts. Right? That should bother you if you're an atheist. So if you're not a Christian, I'd like to invite you on a journey. Like I said, I don't have enough time tonight to do justice to a lot of this, especially the evidence supporting Christianity. But I do want to throw out a few things for you to think about, and I want to let you know how you can take this a little further down the path for those who are willing to have their eyes opened. Now, maybe you've seen the logic in what I've said so far about God, but when it comes to believing what happened 2,000 years ago, the story of Jesus, there's just no way we could possibly know, all right? And there's no way we would ever have the time to look into every crazy idea or religion that comes along, okay? There's too many of them. But although I would agree with that, I'd have to argue that Christianity is not just another crazy idea or religion. It's based on the most popular and influential book ever compiled, no close seconds, and centers on the most famous and influential person who has ever lived. All right, the Christian faith is unprecedented. I'd encourage you, if you weren't here last Sunday, to watch Jason's sermon this last Sunday about Jesus. It was phenomenal. I actually added a couple of things to my teaching tonight from that. There's a science to studying things that happened in the past, and it's called the historical or the evidential method. It's the same way our judicial system tries and sentences criminals. And although these methods can't prove things with 100% certainty, it's just not realistic to think we can operate in life only trusting in things that can be proven 100%. So when it comes to examining the most influential person in history and the most influential book in all of history, come with an open mind and a willingness to be persuaded by reasonable arguments in light of evidential proof. Okay, the alternative is that you just reject everything out of hand no matter what the evidence and reason points to. And I would argue that that's irrational, that's foolish. All right, especially when we know that we're wrong about some of the things we believe. And the fact that failing to embrace Christianity is by far the riskier bet. Some people believe that the Bible is full of translation errors. There's no way we can know what happened. But if you study this, you'll find out that there's really no good reason to believe that. Historians actually have a ton of respect for the Bible. There are some questionable passages, but none of them pertains to a major core Christian doctrine. The science of analyzing ancient documents is called textual criticism, not something I'm going to get into tonight, but I will say that numerous determined skeptics have attacked the Bible's reliability and wound up acknowledging its astounding credibility instead. And when you stake your reputation on proving something, it's extremely hard to have to admit publicly that you were wrong. But that's exactly what's happened in numerous situations. It's a big book, but I highly recommend Evidence That Demands a Verdict. I have it up here so you can look at, by Josh and his son Sean McDowell. Josh was one such skeptic that was determined to prove Christianity a farce and wound up coming to the exact opposite conclusion. And by the way, if God does exist, don't you think he could get people to write down what he wanted them to write down and ensure that it got down to present day adequately preserved? Like, would that be too tough for God? So I think if you settle the idea of God in your mind before you come to the Bible, you look at it a lot differently. All right, many people in history have tried to wipe the Bible from the face of the earth, and here we are centuries later, and most of them have been wiped from the face of the earth. And the Bible continues on unabated, stronger than ever. More people are coming to Christ today than any other time in history. We don't see it so much in the United States, but around the world, it's crazy. The Bible contains somewhere around 2,500 prophecies, including 61 that are very specific prophecies about one particular man, the Messiah. And Jesus fulfilled every one of these 61 prophecies. I've heard some estimates a lot higher than 61, so I went with the lowest one I found. Dr. Peter Stoner, former chairman of the Departments of Mathematics and Astronomy at Pasadena City College, along with a team of graduate students, calculated the probability of one person fulfilling just 8 of these prophecies, not 61, just 8. And the odds are 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Jesus of Nazareth is considered by Christians and countless non-Christians alike to be the most remarkable individual who has ever lived. I'd like to suggest that if God ever did become a man, he'd probably be a lot like Jesus, if not exactly like him. H.G. Wells, who was not a believer, had this to say about the significance of Jesus. He said, "I'm a historian, I'm not a believer. But I must confess as a historian that this penniless preacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very center of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all history, but he does not dominate my heart." Good quote, but sad. It's a really long quote in here by historian Philip Schaff. I'm going to leave it out just because it's pretty long. By the way, I do have up here some copies of a lot of all the quotes that I'm quoting tonight, as well as a few other notes if anybody's interested. One of my favorite books is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Lewis was a brilliant man, a close friend of J.R.R. Tolkien, and a determined atheist who wound up being convinced of the truth of Christianity. Man, that guy is smart. Read some of his stuff. He will make you think. In speaking about Jesus, Lewis said, and I'm going to try not to break down on this one. "I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I just don't accept his claim to be God. That's the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to." How would you like some solid investment advice? All right. This tip alone could make your time here tonight worth the price of admission. You guys did have to pay to get in here tonight, right? I mean, we had food back there, great speaker.
I paid twice.
Yeah? Well, I'm glad to hear that because Russell made me pay. And I didn't see anybody else paying though, so I'm glad to hear that. So stock market. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever played the stock market. Raise your hand. You ever bought and sold stock? I have. Well, when buying and selling stock, you really only take a loss or a gain when you sell. All right, unless, of course, the company goes bankrupt. I've had that happen too. But there's a mental trap that winds up costing a lot of people a lot of money, and I'm serious about this being a good investment tip. And that's what really separates the wise, seasoned investors from the rookies. If you're holding on to a stock that's going down in price and you're not rushing out to sell it, there's one of two reasons. Okay, it's either because you're really confident it's going to go back up in price, or you don't want to acknowledge that this investment was a bad one. Okay, because the worst possible strategy in the stock market is to buy high and sell low, right? No one wants to be one of those people. Well, as long as you don't sell, there's the chance that it could go back up and you would avoid being one of them. Okay, I've felt that pressure myself. It's a real tangible thing that's hard to resist. Okay, I know that because I made this mistake, I'm embarrassed to say, and lost tens of thousands of dollars. I was listening to somebody else's advice and didn't want to admit I had been duped. I hadn't really done the research myself, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But think about it for a minute. If you really believe the stock is very likely going to go back up, you probably would be considering, how can I get out there and buy some more? Right? If you're not thinking that way, it's most likely because you don't have that level of confidence in it. So the wise decision would be to sell it and go buy something that you do truly believe will go up. The fact that you're not struggling with the temptation to go buy more probably betrays the truth of the situation. You aren't a wise investor who's holding on to a great investment. You're an inexperienced investor who's afraid of admitting that they made a bad choice. Okay, and they really are one of those people. So bite the bullet, take the loss, and get into a better investment. All right, if it's going down, unless you want to buy more, there's probably something out there that you could feel better about. Don't hold on to it. All right, the same mental trap can cost us dearly when it comes to our decision about Jesus. Our unwillingness to admit that we've made a bad decision can keep us from correcting it. All right, essentially an ego just might be the costliest thing that there is. Okay, mine has cost me and my family a lot. But at the age of 18, I let go of my ego when faced with the question of Jesus. And that was the best decision I ever made. Followed by my decision to date and then trick Jennifer into marrying me. Now she's stuck. All right, not fair. I know, but God rewards suffering, so I'm doing her a massive favor. What can I say except you're welcome? Are you currently taking a risk that you have no business taking? Okay, because you don't really have a clue what you're doing. Right, you haven't done the research. All right, you're just betting a hunch, or maybe following the advice of someone else. Don't pay the ultimate price because you weren't willing to acknowledge that you might be holding a bad investment. In the Bible, God says that people will search for him and find him when they search for him with their whole hearts. In the book of Acts, chapter 17, it says, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us." Jeremiah 29:13, God said, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen." I keep spitting on my computer, sorry about that. "Being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." All right, the Bible teaches that God has provided clues of his existence all around us. And those who genuinely want to find him will earnestly follow those clues, and he will reveal himself to them. But these clues are not so overpowering as to compel everybody to believe. Right? He could do that. Okay, he's God. He could just appear and everybody would not have any choice. They would just know. All right, and I'm sure they would fall down and worship, and I don't think there's anything else we could do. But he makes it easy to ignore the clues for those who don't want to see them. Those who would rather be their own God, live by their own rules. To me, it kind of seems like his own version of natural selection. Here's a table that my daughter bought at Goodwill. If this table just kept falling over no matter what she did, would she be fully justified in throwing it on the burn pile? Right? Not a lot of money. Good money, not a lot of money. Yeah. Check out this little figurine I made. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So I made him out of Play-Doh. I didn't buy him. I made it with my own hands. Probably pretty obvious. And just as obvious that I have absolutely no talent for sculpture, except for this little cowboy hat that I think turned out really kind of cool. A lot better than I thought it was going to. Well, I fashioned him with care and pride, and I named him Bob. Okay, so this is Bob. Suppose Bob wouldn't maintain his shape. He just kept reverting back into a lump of clay. Would I be justified in throwing Bob in the trash? I could do that, right? My son Elisha and I at one time were creating our own strategy game. Thought it was going to be really cool. Did we have the right to make up the rules since we were the ones creating it? If God created us and everything else, we owe him everything. Okay, we're currently breathing his air. Okay, take a couple of deep breaths right now and just reflect on the fact that the air that's keeping you alive every moment is on loan from God, right? You didn't create the air, you didn't create yourself. Does he have the right to tell us what to do and what not to do and throw us in the garbage or on the burn pile if we refuse to cooperate, right? He made us. He made everything. He gets to create the rules. That's how it works. The Bible tells us that mankind has rebelled against God and gone our own way. We basically gave God the single finger salute, not that finger, and said, we will determine our own lives, right? It's like that little guy Bob here, who I made out of Play-Doh, telling me that he will decide what's right and wrong, and he doesn't care what I want or think. I wonder if that's kind of how we sound to God. Have you, by your choices, told God to leave you alone, and then wondered why he doesn't make himself more obvious? All right, I didn't have this initially in my plans, so I don't have a slide for it, but one of the most sobering verses in the Bible, in my opinion, is in the book of Job. Job was basically complaining to God and challenging his fairness, and God finally came and spoke to Job. And his first words always give me chills. He said, I'll see if I can use my good God voice. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Can you imagine God saying that to you? Like, I think I would just fall to the ground in a puddle of goo. All right, but if God made us, he gets to call the shots. All right, that's how it works. Jesus asked his disciples who people said that he was. And then after they answered, he asked them one of the most important questions I think anyone can answer. Jason mentioned this on Sunday. He asked them, and who do you say that I am? And the answer to that question just might dictate your eternal future. So make sure you've thought long and hard about it. Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor who sentenced Jesus of Nazareth to death by crucifixion. He asked the crowd a question that I think is a perfect follow-up to the one Jesus asked his disciples. He asked them, what should I do with this Jesus who is called Christ? Now the crowd shouted, crucify him! Essentially, we don't want to have anything to do with him. And Jesus hung there and asked God to forgive them. So what will you do with this Jesus who's called Christ? This Jesus who lived the most miraculous life ever recorded, even many non-Christians will tell you that, influencing the world more than any person in history. Will you say that you want nothing to do with him? The gift he offers isn't something that you want. You aren't even willing to follow the clues to see if he might be who he said he was. Jesus said, whoever acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Okay, again, it's like playing a game of roulette. The wheel is spinning, and if you're not currently a Christian, your bet is on black, rejection, and you are all in. You can move your bet to red before the wheel stops spinning, but of course nobody ever knows when that's going to be. And again, all of this might not be true, okay? But since there's a lot we don't know, it could be. And many have presented far more comprehensive arguments than I have tonight. Seek them out. I can point you in the right direction. There's so much more that I wanted to share tonight. The evidence for Christianity is literally overwhelming. I have a few of my favorite books up here. If you want to come up and see just some that I would recommend, you're welcome to do that. But I do want to give a next step to anybody who is intrigued by what I shared tonight and wants to follow this path a little bit further. So this Friday, 3 days from now, we're going to meet here at the church and watch a movie called The Case for Christ. Great movie. It says Thursday. Okay. I changed that. Initially, it was going to be Thursday, excuse me. But there wasn't a place here at the church to watch it, so we changed it to Friday. So that is Friday, not Thursday. It's a true story about a man who tried very hard to prove Christianity was false and was extremely reluctantly convinced of its truth. If you still have questions and you want to follow the breadcrumbs, or you just want to increase your own understanding of the evidence supporting your own faith, come join us at 6:30 here at the church. The front doors out here will be locked. We'll be watching it back here, so you'll need to come around the building. You'll be able to get back in there. If there is the slightest chance that this could all be true, nothing is more important or more urgent. Be smart. Don't let your ego or the busyness of life get in the way of getting out of a bad investment as soon as possible. You know how in so many of those movies these days, most people think things are a certain way, and they're just going along, and then one person realizes that the reality is actually very different. And then they have to try and convince everybody else. Okay, their eyes have been opened, and they see. I'm thinking of movies like The Giver, The Matrix, Divergent. Okay, the list goes on. Well, if you've seen The Matrix, then I guess you could say tonight I'm offering you the red pill. Okay, wanted to use this line for a long time. All right, you can take the blue pill, I guess, and wake up tomorrow as if nothing ever happened. Or you can take the red pill and find out just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Well, Christianity says this isn't just true in these movies. Okay, there is an illusion that most people believe, a matrix of sorts, and someday that illusion is going to be removed. And that at that time, everything will be revealed for what it is. But as C.S. Lewis put it, when the director steps onto the stage, the play is over. Okay, that's it. And that's it for what I wanted to share tonight. Let's go ahead and enter into some worship and focus on the God who gives us the very breath that we need to breathe. And if you don't know the Lord, if you're not a Christian, it can't hurt to ask and talk to him tonight. Ask him to show himself to you. Commit to him that you will follow the clues yourself, no matter where they lead, making it your number one priority. If you want to become a Christian tonight, it's simple. It will cost everything that you have, but it's simple. The Bible says if we confess Jesus as Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, we will be saved. We've all sinned against God. Ask Jesus to forgive you. He can do that because he paid the price for sin for everybody who would come to him. The last thing that he said on the cross was tetelestai. It's what merchants used to stamp on bills of sale in the marketplace. It means paid in full. My sins have been paid in full because of what Christ did. And yours can too. If you have questions or you want to pray with somebody tonight, there will be leaders in the back. So let's worship now the only one who is worthy of worship.